Hey everyone, it's Daniel and Wes here from White Rock Coffee, and today we want to give you guys a very special holiday brew video for our Christmas roast this year.
Did you just nail that? Boom.
Was
wow.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Oh, we're still going.
Info?
Yeah, I'm recording, so just keep going.
Okay, perfect.
Oh, I just blinked on what I'm going to say.
Hey Wes, can you tell us a little bit about the coffee that we're going to brew with this year?
Yeah, so the Christmas roast, this is our 2022 Christmas roast that we designed a beautiful package for. We're really excited about. This is actually a blend this year of the Honduran natural coffee and a Guatemalan washed coffee. The reason why we blended it is honestly, so let me tell you about how we find these coffees. So every year, about 3-4 months in advance, we have a tasting team that tastes for quality every week, and we're also purchasing new coffees. Well, as we are searching for these coffees, we're kind of going through flight after flight each week, and we're just narrowing it down. Well, we got to 2 coffees we just couldn't say no to, and we loved them, and we ended up deciding, like, as we blended them, they even got better, and it kind of brought out the best of both of them. So this year's Christmas roast it has notes of cherry cordial, caramel, red berries, and cocoa. So you should know there's a lot that goes into this coffee. So as you're getting ready to brew the Christmas roast coffee this year at your family tradition, and we understand that this has kind of become a tradition for us as much as it has for you guys, and we're incredibly grateful. You should know there's a lot of love and a lot of care that goes into just the selection process of these coffees. We really hope you enjoy it. So now Daniel's going to tell us a little bit about the brewing process. Before we get into you brewing with us, he's going to set a few ground rules for brewing the coffee.
Absolutely. So for this coffee, since it's such a spectacular, special roast that's near and dear to our hearts for this year, we're going to want to set a few ground rules to make sure that you guys at home are brewing just as well as us inside of the lab here today. So a few important points. Number 1, you want to make sure that your coffee is fresh as possible. Part of the roasting process, there's a lot of CO2 around those beans. That CO2 traps in all the volatile aromatics. Some of the best flavors in this coffee are trapped in from that CO2. So you want to make sure that you get the bag as fresh as possible. And next, we're going to want to make sure that we are grinding our coffee as fresh as possible. So if you have a grinder at home, that's perfect. That's going to give you the best flavor out of this coffee every single time if you can grind it fresh and then use it immediately. If you don't have a grinder at home, then you'll want to make sure that you get it ground from White Rock right before you leave.
Now, my suggestion is this, that if you are getting it ground beforehand, the best way to keep it fresh and last several days while it's ground so it doesn't go stale is get one of these Airscape canisters. We put them on our shelves in our shops. We love these things. They push out the extra oxygen. They don't allow for oxygen to get in, keep it airtight, and they keep your coffee fresh and tasting good.
Absolutely. And our third thing that we want to make sure before our brewing is that we want to make sure that we have the right water to brew with. We've got to set our standard even before we start brewing our coffee. So we want to make sure that we're using filtered water for our brewing. So not distilled and not tap water. Distilled water is going to have too little minerals. Tap water is going to have too many to give us the right extraction, the right flavor that we're looking for in both of these recipes that we are going to provide for you guys today. So you guys are going to be brewing with us at home while we do this recipe for you. So out of these 2 recipes, the first one that we're going to do is the Chemex. You'll notice on the side of our coffee bags as well, we've got that recipe for you guys so you can brew along with us at home. So the first things first for our brew recipe for the Chemex. So we want to make sure that we're using the correct amount of coffee. We're going to use 50 grams as our dose with this coffee, more than enough to go around for your family and friends in this holiday season. So 50 grams of coffee. We're going to use a 1:17 ratio. So that means how much water we're diluting our coffee with. So at 50 grams at a 1:17, that means that our final amount when we're weighing out our coffee is going to be 850 grams. The last item that we want to make sure is our grind size as well. We want to make sure our grind size for this Chemex is medium coarse. That's going to give us the best grind size, that'll give us the best extraction out of this coffee as possible. Okay, first things first for our Chemex recipe. So we want to start out by pre-rinsing our paper filter before we brew. So the paper filter is important to be pre-rinsed for two big reasons. So the first one is that this filter is going to taste kind of papery. Surprise, surprise. It's going to have this negative paper taste that we don't want in our final cup of coffee. The second thing that this is doing is actually preheating our Chemex as well. We want to make sure that the glass that the Chemex is made out of is as close to a brewing temperature as possible. So in order to do that, we can kind of kill two birds with one stone here in the beginning by pre-rinsing our paper filter that way. So before we begin, we want to make sure that we are dumping out all the water that we went ahead and pre-wetted our filter with before we start brewing. Okay, now that we've pre-rinsed our filter and we've dosed our 50 grams of coffee into our Chemex, we want to make sure, just as he did, and settle that coffee across the top. We want to start out with a flat bed of coffee, so go ahead and give it a shake if you're following along at home. Next item, we want to go ahead and bloom our coffee as well. So we're doing a triple bloom weight for this coffee. So remember, we use 50 grams of ground coffee. So triple that is going to be 150 grams of water that we're putting right across the top. Blooming is a really important part of the brewing process because it opens up a lot of natural avenues for water to flow through the bed of coffee while it's self-saturating in that way. So it helps us get better flavor out of our coffee. It also rapidly degasses the coffee as well. So that CO2 that we talked about for scaling coffee, it does a great job at trapping in aromatics, but then as soon as it's ready to brew, we want that CO2 to get the heck out of here. So because CO2 is just mainly bitter. Now, after we've waited about 50 seconds to 1 minute long for that bloom, we're going to go ahead and start with our first pour. So we are going from that 150 that we poured for our bloom all the way up to 450 grams of water. So if you're watching that scale at home, make sure that you fill it right up from 150 to 450. This is a two-pour method. Where basically it's a 50-50 pour. So we're doing 50% in one pour, 50% in the second pour, and then we're done. So we're going all the way up to 450 for our first pour, and then once we get to 450 grams of water, we are going to give a very gentle stir to the coffee grounds. This is going to give us a little bit of a bump in extraction by causing some agitation to the bed, and then allowing for it to flow a little bit easier while it's brewing. After we've gotten up to that 450 grams of water and done a little bit of a gentle stirring motion, we are going to wait for the bed of coffee to get, or the water to get down really, really close to the bed of coffee before we start our next pour up to 850 grams. Okay, now that the water level has descended pretty close to the bed, we're going to go ahead and start with our second pour here. So we're going from 450 up to 850. This is going to be our final pour here. So we're pouring the same way that we did the first time, concentric circles, clockwise or counterclockwise, all the way around until we get to our final weight. Now, it's not necessarily important the shape that you pour with your kettle, whether it's clockwise or counterclockwise. What matters is that you pour evenly when you're brewing. Am I applying the correct amount of water to one area and then to the other area of the bed as well? So we want to make sure that it's about as even as possible when we do that. Now that we're approaching 850 grams on our scale, we are going to give it one final stir with either a stir stick or spoon, whatever you have available, just to give us an extra little bump of agitation to get a little bit more extraction going on in our brew. And then while the water level is declining, we're also going to take the neck of our Chemex and give it a little bit of a swirl to collect any coffee grounds that were sitting on the side of the Chemex body. Perfect. Now that our coffee has finished drawing down, look at that, it's beautiful. We're gonna go ahead and take our filter. Once you can see the dry coffee grounds that all the water has descended through it, we're gonna go ahead and take our filter and get rid of that guy. Throw him right in the trash. Perfect. And now you have your beautiful cup of our Christmas roast coffee brewed on the Chemex brewer. Can I get a little smell of that? Smell it a little bit? Ooh. Wow, that smells delicious.
Smells like Christmas. Next up, we're gonna brew the French press. So there's one important thing I wanna mention before we get going, is you wanna go ahead and preheat your French press before you grind your coffee, before you get into any of the steps of brewing. Getting this really hot is very important for the extraction process. So go ahead and use the hot water you're gonna be using. We're gonna keep the same water temperature. Use 200-degree water to go and preheat it. We're also gonna keep the same dose of coffee. Okay, so let's get started. So first thing, go ahead and dump out the water in your French press, and then we're gonna grind our coffee. Okay, so we've got a hot French press on the scale. We've got our coffee in. Now we are going to be using a coarser grind for brewing with the French press. Typically, with a grinder at home, you're going to be using the coarsest you can go on your setting. If you have the nicer the grinder, you can actually be a little bit more specific with this, and you want to go slightly finer than the coarsest setting. Okay, the rest is going to be pretty simple. So we have our coffee in, our scale is set to 0, and we're going to start our timer. The brew time is going to be pretty similar. So we have our hot water, and we are going to pour in the same type of dose that we did for our Chemex. So we want to bloom our coffee. So we've got 50 grams of dry coffee, and we're going to be pouring on about 150 grams of water. We're going to let that sit for about 45 seconds. All right, now we're at 45 seconds. So go ahead and we're going to pour the rest of our water. The one thing that'll be different with the French press is we like to brew a little bit stronger of a ratio with the French press. So as we used a 1:17 ratio before, we're going to be using a 1:16 ratio. So now that you're at 800 grams, you're going to want to give it a stir. You're going to push all the foam that's on the top, and any floating grinds are going to go under the surface with a good stir. And then you're going to cover it up. Let's trap all the heat inside. And now, that's the hard part. Next, you're going to wait until the timer reaches 4 minutes. All right, the timer is approaching 4 minutes, so we're ready for the next step. Now, this might be new for some of you. What we're going to do is we're going to take off the plunger, and we are going to skim off the top layer of foam and any of the floating coffee grinds that are still there. This is going to clean up our cup. This is going to slow extraction way down and prepare us just to be able to enjoy. I find that it makes a much better French press. The old two-spoon method, huh?
Yeah, the
old
two. They
two-spoon.
call me Danny Two Spoons where I was growing up.
Okay, the timer is approaching 4.5 minutes, which we are right on time. And next we're going to plunge. Now when we plunge, I know it's very satisfying to do this part, but we don't plunge all the way down, and you definitely don't want to do it too fast. So we're really just going to be pushing until everything is under the surface, probably about halfway. And now the next is the most important part at this point, which is we want to decant the coffee we just brewed. We don't want the coffee to continue to brew as it's in contact with the coffee grinds at the bottom of the French press. So if we pour it out, it will stop brewing entirely, and that way you won't have that last cup be so bitter. So there we go. We brewed the French press, we plunged it, we got all the coffee out, and now we're just ready to enjoy it. Guys, thank you so much for spending time with us today and brewing with us. And also, thank you for just including White Rock Coffee in your family tradition at home. We are so privileged to be able to share this with you.
And if you guys had any questions or comments about the recipes that we did today, or if you want to just tell us about how good this coffee was at home on whatever way you decided to brew it, you can email us at brewlab@wrcoffee.com. Or if you were thinking of grabbing a ticket to one of our coffee classes as a fantastic holiday gift idea, you can check us out on the education tab of our website at wrcoffee.com. honduranandsanmarcoscoffee.com. And from our family to yours, Merry
Christmas.
Christmas.
We need a recording of we need to both slurp at the same time and then say, that's the good stuff.
Okay.
All right, ready?
Now let's do it.
That's the good stuff.